Hey everyone, this is Talking Garnet with Garnet Report here at Williams-Brice Stadium. I'm Tori Beth Black, and I have with me this week Ron Aiken from Gamecock Central to talk about none other than Gamecock football. Now Ron, it was a big week this past Saturday. The Gamecocks went on to defeat Clemson 31-17 in the rival game. What are your initial thoughts on the game?
Well, it was just a super impressive game for South Carolina to have won 5 straight in this rivalry. It's something that those of us who have been following South Carolina for a long time haven't seen, could hardly expect, and still have a hard time believing. It's one of those Sundays you wake up and pinch yourself that it happened again. But really, what sort of struck me was that it followed the same formula as the previous wins. You know, Clemson comes in killing people. South Carolina comes in, kind of struggling to get past teams that don't look that good. They only beat Florida by 5, a team that goes home and then loses to Georgia Southern. So you don't feel great about South Carolina. Clemson looks like world beaters, and yet the result is the same. It's another South Carolina victory. It's another rivalry win. It's another 364-day pass of just belittling the living tarnation out of Clemson fans, which is a beautiful thing all the way around.
Now, both offense and defense played hard. It seemed like every player was laying out all out on the field. But in your perspective, who was the MVP of the game?
That has to be Garnet. When the running game stopped for South Carolina, when the passing game really wasn't there, the running game of Connor Shaw, specifically those called quarterback runs on those draws, was the difference. And I think that kind of goes into a little bit of out-coaching for Steve Spurrier versus Brett Venables on the defensive side for Clemson. They found what would work, even when they had made adjustments. That was the play that seemed to give them a little bit of life when Clemson had made the halftime adjustments to sort of slow Carolina down. And I think that's where you have to credit Steve Spurrier and credit Connor Shaw, because that's a guy that you're going to look back on and think, man, all the things he did, it never blew you away. He was never mentioned as one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC, and really rarely got mentioned for best quarterbacks in South Carolina history until he broke the record for the all-time wins, which I think now is at 25 or 26, I believe, after Clemson. And so you start looking at the things that he did well, and that was protecting the football. It was not turning the ball over. It was game management, and then when he had to do it with his feet, he did. And all those third down conversions, all those big plays made after a play had broken down will be sorely missed in the future. And he leaves with a wonderful legacy of never having lost to Clemson.
Now, after the game, Sammy Watkins, one of the Clemson players, stated, quote, "That wasn't Clemson football." That statement has gained a lot of attention on both sides of the rivalry so far. What are your thoughts on that statement and just the attention that it's gotten?
Well, it's funny because apparently that is Clemson football. I don't know what they consider not Clemson football, but losing to South Carolina is Clemson football under Dabo Swinney. He's 1-5 versus South Carolina. That's the same record in the rivalry that Lou Holtz has, which is the only time those two people will ever be mentioned in the same sentence. And so that's the only thing you can say about that rivalry is that is the definition of it. Clemson somehow comes in higher ranked, more accolades, and then underperforms. South Carolina comes in and just takes care of business by playing good football. And I think that's maybe what gets lost in this rivalry is that South Carolina has just played better football. And, Sammy Watkins will go down as one of the all-time great explosive Clemson players without a touchdown against South Carolina. Taj Boyd will go down as one of the all-time great Clemson explosive players without a win versus South Carolina. Those are the legacies that they will wear for the rest of their lives, and that is one of the most exciting, most profound, most powerful things about this win is that it cemented that legacy for both of those players, and Clemson can never say a thing about it.
Now let's talk about the 5 seniors on the roster for a minute. It was senior day on Saturday, right before they went up against Clemson. And especially let's talk about Jimmy Legree and Connor Shaw, but all 5 of them, they're walking out of Williams-Brice Stadium never losing to Clemson in all 4 years that they've played here. How big of a deal is that to them?
It's huge because they become the second class, now to have done that. And another guy that doesn't get mentioned because there's really only 4 scholarship seniors, Legree, Sutton, Ronald Patrick, Connor Shaw. But Quentin Smith is a guy that's on the team, a squad member, didn't really get a lot of action this year, not even on the scholarship, but suited up and then recovered the fumble there late in the game on that second punt that Clemson fumbled. And so great night for him. You mentioned some of those other guys. It's a legacy that will be hard to beat. They go down as probably the smallest class, I think, in school history and also the winningest in terms of overall number of victories. And what a legacy for those guys to have come in and did what they did. Because really, without them, Ronald Patrick was such a key member of this offensive line this season. When he got hurt against Tennessee, it showed. That was one of the reasons they didn't have success in that game. And then obviously Connor Shaw, we all know about, undefeated in this stadium, which is so impressive. Probably will never be beaten. And then Jimmy Legree, another guy that just was a steady contributor on the defensive side at cornerback, such a key position. He and Victor Hampton were going to be counted on to lock down Clemson's receivers. They did. And then the other guy, Chaz Sutton, had basically sort of an underperforming senior year, but against Clemson in his final game comes in, strips Taj Boyd, recovers the fumble, and probably what was the key moment of the game. So amazing legacy for those guys. They couldn't hold their heads any higher after what they accomplished here.
Now let's talk about three other players who aren't technically seniors, but who have stated that they have intent to submit their evaluation for the 2014 NFL Draft, those being Jadeveon Clowney, Kelsey Quarles, and Victor Hampton. Now, do you think there's any chance that we're going to see them next year dressing in Gamecock gear, or are these three players gone for good?
You might see them in Gamecock gear on the sidelines when their NFL teams have a bye week. That's about the only time. All three are so good. Obviously, Jadeveon Clowney was never going to come back, and everybody was just peachy keen with that. And the same thing with Quarles. I mean, what a senior season he had. Really, from about the Missouri game on, when I think he had a bit of an injury scare, he just really rededicated himself and became a major force in that defensive line. Really solidified things as a team leader, as sort of a spokesperson for the defense, as a guy that gets everybody hyped up. So he had a monster year after starting off a little bit slowly. And then Victor Hampton, also very similar tale for him. Started off a little bit slowly, was responsible for some defensive lapses, trying to do too much. Once he started trusting his players around him, had a spectacular second half of the season, and like Legree, was key in shutting down Clemson on defense against a really highly vaunted passing attack. So all three of those guys rightly will go to the NFL, and best of luck to them.
Now finally, let's talk about bowl season. Obviously, with Missouri defeating Texas A&M on Saturday, the Gamecocks fell out of the race for the SEC championship, but we still have bowl season. Where do you see the Gamecocks going for the season, and who do you think that they will be playing?
Well, personally, I would love to see them go to the Cotton Bowl. It would be really fun to have that trip. It's a trip that South Carolina has never made. A trip that South Carolina has made and likely probably will make again will be the Capital One Bowl to face a representative, obviously, from the Big Ten, which South Carolina has had a lot of success versus, I believe, 4-0 in their last four bowl matches. Well, I'm sorry, 4-1. I forget the Iowa loss in the Outback Bowl. I don't like to think about that game. But I think it'll still be a good bowl trip, whether it's to Dallas or whether it's to Orlando again. It'll be a way to sort of put a capper on a season that has been really overachieving when you look at the youth that's on this team that Spurrier had mentioned. And then it bodes well for next season. So a lot to look forward to still. A lot of practices to come. The coaches talked to me about how important those bowl practices are. It's like another spring to get a lot of those young guys developed, because they really are able to develop that young talent. And it's become a routine habit to play on January 1st. And man, that and 5 straight wins versus Clemson is about as good as life gets.
And we look forward to seeing what the Gamecocks can do in bowl season. Thank you for watching Talking Garnet with Tori Beth Black, and make sure to check out GarnetReport.com for all your coverage on Gamecock sports.